right, we are now in level 1, and we are about to do the 7B class in the basics of family life of the spiritual maturity dynamics. And the title of this lesson is Resolving Conflict. So don't give me a hard time. No, I'm just kidding. Don't give me a hard time. Yeah, resolving conflict. Most of us are living in a realm where we think that conflict is a terribly horrible, bad thing. And it is to some degree if it's a lifestyle, right? But we want to talk about a little bit and how we need to deal with it in order to improve the family dynamic. So follow along with me. I'm going to read the key verse, as it were, Romans 12, verse 8, which it says, "If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men." Now, I can be honest, I probably haven't always done that exactly the best that I should, right? Sometimes I'm just a little agitated and I try to stir up, and that's when I create conflict, and not always in a good way, right? It says here, peace is a top priority in the home. Peace. Yeah, it's not always a reality. The ability to live together in harmony, to resolve the inevitable conflicts that come as a part of daily life, are indispensable elements to a strong family. Many families are far from that ideal. They have from being safe havens, places of refuge. They are faced with constant conflict, escalated tension, continual frustration over how to deal with problems, right? Part of the reason why is because they don't deal with them in a productive way. Occasional tension and conflict are a part of every household. It's going to happen. We have different people with different expectations, perhaps different backgrounds. You know, even though your kids may have similar backgrounds, over the course of time, different things are happening, different influences, and especially the husband and wife, they did not come from the same backgrounds, right? We're occupying a limited physical space, right? Day in, day out, year after year after year. To think there will never be a problem is naive, right? But to think that constant arguing, fussing, fighting is normal is not accurate as well. The truth is, all families will experience some conflict, but it should not be the norm, and should be resolved as quickly as possible, as Christ-like as possible. So we're going to examine some of the causes of conflict and how to deal with them, so that we have homes that nourish and enrich and reflect God's love, not only to each other, but to the world as well. All right, Roman numeral 1. You can live together with those in your family without destroying one another. Some of us need to hear that, right? I think I'm about to kill that person, or I'm going to just destroy them or whatever, right? Because it's just too much. But again, it's because we're not thinking biblically and we're not reacting to things or responding to things in a biblical fashion. A, is your family friend or foe, right? It's how we perceive things, how we look at them. When we think of the word family, we think, wonderful, supportive, right? Lifting us up, sharing. But it's not the reality a lot of us live in. Our family relationships should supply the greatest support, but they can also supply the deepest devastation. There's no pain like divorce or abuse or molestation or other elements that happen in families, right? B, I love you, but I don't like you. Ooh, that seems to be true in a lot of family relationships, doesn't it? Have you ever had the feeling that you have to love your family members, but you don't really like them? In fact, you try to avoid them and you don't hang out with them. Do you ever wish you had other people in your family instead of the ones you got? Like you see, oh, I'd like to have that one and this one over here, and oh, she would be good, kind of thing. But listen, God gave you your specific family. You didn't get to choose them, and they didn't get to choose you. We need to acknowledge that He works through the various personalities and roles to break down our ridiculous independence, like we just want to be ourselves and do our will, and uses them to mold us, to shape us, They are often the most difficult relationships, but at the same time, they can be the most rewarding, right? The intimacy that we establish as we grow up, we know each other really well, we have similar things that we reflect upon that bring up similar memories, right? But they can inflict pain, but yes, they can also bring joy. So let's talk about 3 main sources of conflict in the family. A, hurt causes conflict. Hurt. James says that wounded pride is the source of much contention. That's found in James chapter 3, verses 14 through 16. Right? Wounded pride, because we react. Somebody hurt our feelings and we want to react. Proverbs 13:10 says, only by pride comes contention. We're defending our turf. We don't want anybody to cross us. We don't want to be hurt, right? When a person feels rejected, belittled, overlooked, it tends to bring out anger. Meekness is the opposite of pride. If we are humble, we don't get all riled up. We don't let things rattle us. I can tell you, my wife, she is very meek in that sense. She doesn't let people just, she's like almost sometimes like, why didn't that bother you? Because she just doesn't let those things get to her that way. Jealousy, pride, hurt. We read in the Bible that Saul's hatred and jealousy of David caused Saul to change from loving David as a loyal comrade to hating him to the point of where he attempted to kill him on numerous occasions because of his pride. Saul has killed his thousands and David his tens of thousands. And it might have been just because it flowed, the song, I don't know, but really he should have just had a conversation. And we're going to talk about resolving conflict later, but his hurt caused him to have a different perspective. His pride got hurt. B, fear also leads to conflict. In relationship, people will react abnormally because of fear. Things from the past are remembered and they're made bigger, right? Everything is blown. It's like that fish that you caught here, and as you go through the story over and over and over, it just keeps on growing, right? It's the same thing with our memories. We don't always remember things exactly the way that they happened, right? We think we saw this, or we think it was this way, but we really don't know, okay? We see things moving in a certain direction that we don't like. We react in fear, even though what's happening now may not be anything like what happened in the past. Things are different. People's are different. Situations different, whatever. And often in a marriage, we fail to realize the very real fears that different, the wife has, the husband has, that they're struggling with. And so we overreact to their overreactions, okay? C, frustration leads to conflict. Oh, this is a weakness of mine. Every person has certain things that are important to him. To the husband, it may be to be on time. We will not be late. To the wife, it may be to just look right. Of course, my wife always looks just right. There you go. When we are frustrated, when things aren't happening the way we want them, some of it's about control. We want things to be the way that we want them to be, right? We're like a pot about to boil over. The phone is ringing. The kids are crying. That check bounced. The dog's barking. The meal's burning. Cars breaking down. Computers glitching, etc. It's getting all kinds of things. And they just lead to more and more frustration. So these are the three primary things: hurt, fear, and frustration. They're the primary colors of conflict. And it's a combination of these things, right, that brings up a boiling point and is at the root of conflict. See, generosity is an attitude of the heart, not just about giving money. You cannot give what you do not have. And God doesn't regard the amount, but he does appreciate the degree and willingness on your part to give it, right? To think about others. There's three main ways that people respond. We talked about hurt, fear, right, and frustration as the causes, but they are the root that brings something else out. We want to talk about the three main ways people respond to conflict. The first one is A, explosion. I wish I could make the thing shake. I'm trying to do it for you there. Is one reaction, right? The first is to explode. The instantly inflamed with passion and let it out. They don't, no hesitation. What's that? And just go crazy. The Bible says to be slow to wrath. James 1:19. Meaning we're to be slow to express our anger, even when it's justified. Thomas Jefferson once said, if you are angry, count to 10. If you are really angry, count to 100. Because explosive anger is destructive. And once it works, once it becomes a pattern. We become conditioned. This is the way we respond to situations, is just to let it all hang out, as it were. But anger in that fashion destroys. It never builds other people up. It never builds a relationship up. Right? Some people say, oh, you just need to scream and let it out. Right? But see, all we're doing is venting anger, and it doesn't solve anything. It feels good right then, But guess what? The situation and the problem that occurred that brought that that frustration, that anger out is still sitting there. It hasn't been resolved. Nothing's happened. You're just giving vent to your frustration, but now what are you going to do? Right? B, implosion is the opposite reaction, where it all comes inside. Some people bury everything, pretend like it's not happening, right? Keep it subdued, but it's there. It's just quaking inside like a volcano ready to explode. Buried toxic waste in our lives will eventually surface in some very unhealthy ways, right? Someone once said, the anger I refuse to admit, my stomach is keeping track of. Oftentimes this implosion, this holding things in, brings about illness, but also leads to bitterness, depression, right? Mental issues, right? Besides just physical reactions to holding it all in. The third reaction is the one we want to talk more about, which is confrontation or resolution. Let's get to an answer. It is the best way to deal with conflict. Ephesians 4:26 says, do not let the sun go down upon your wrath. In other words, get to it. Resolve the thing. Some people just want to stew on it forever and ever, right? But that doesn't bring resolution. It doesn't allow things to go forward. Couples who commit to not letting the sun go down on their wrath develop they don't develop the long-standing simmering problems that will eventually come out. It will come out sometime, somewhere along the way. When you least expect it, it'll come out, right? And in this sense, we want to understand the hurt, the fear, the frustration that somebody else is feeling, and then move towards the resolution of that, to talk about it, okay? So there are 3 phases of resolution. The first is to recall it. Recall it. Memories store every fear, hurt, and frustration, okay? It's just like it's locked in. It's like it becomes compartmentalized. You may not have dealt with it, and you think that if I ignore it, I won't have to deal with it, but it's still there, okay? You reflect on it. You play it over and over, right? You just see it wherever you go. And you recall the words the other person was trying to say. Oftentimes you try to interpret what they were feeling or thinking, and you suppose they know, right? And because you don't have the information, you haven't talked about it or looked it over, you never get the insights you need to find out what was the real reason why this occurred. What was the cause of this conflict? The second thing is to resolve it, okay? Recalling it is, again, the two of you sitting down, okay, this is what happened. This is what went on in our life, in this situation. What can we do to, I shouldn't say that. What is it? Let's talk. This is what I felt. This is what you felt. This is what I was thinking. And this is what you said. And this is how I interpret. And you talk about it without being offensive again, but to just, okay, let's be real open about it. If you don't talk about it, you can't resolve it. But B is resolve it. Listen, unresolved conflict will block your ability to worship or walk with the Lord. In fact, Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verses 23 to 24, resolving conflict was more important than worship. Okay? Because danger is just anger with a D in front, right? To anger. When we approach somebody about an unresolved conflict, it can be scary. I've often thought lots of times when I'm, pursuing resolution, I like any human being, I begin to play out the scenario. Well, I'll say this, and then, they'll probably say that, and then I'll have to respond like this, and pretty soon you got this elaborate script going out that really has no basis in reality, because you'll say the first thing, and the response that you thought they were going to say is not even what they say, right? You just need to say, God, I want to have the right spirit, I want resolution, I want this relationship to grow, right? And here's the thing, conflict's going to happen. I think sometimes, too, I want to say that we can't always avoid it, nor should we. If we're going around trying to always just kind of stay away from things, we never create depth in relationship. Let me just say this. This might seem like I'm speaking contrary, but here's the thing. When we talk about resolving it, we're going to talk about one more point as well, is that when you seek to resolve a confrontation, a conflict, I should say, what you're demonstrating is that the relationship I have with you that has been damaged at some point in some way here is important to me enough that I want to bring resolution to it. I don't want to let it sit there. I don't want it to let it disappear. I want it to grow And oftentimes, because you've had conflict, and that's what I'm saying, when you've had conflict and had resolution, what you find is an even stronger bond. And you begin to learn more about each other so that you're more careful. I'm not saying you're going to have to tiptoe or whatever, but you know, your certain way of doing things, which isn't really that big a deal or important to you, that might irritate them, is something that you just kind of naturally avoid, because I don't want them to feel that way. I don't want them to have that anger and frustration and such, right? Because they matter to me. That's what resolution demonstrates as well, that the relationship is important, okay? Matthew 18:15 tells you to go to your brother alone, okay? And if that does not work, there's a process, okay? It might go to your spouse first, right? You might have to seek help from your pastor or a counselor. But what you're doing is, I want resolution. My wife and I, we went to a marriage counselor probably when we had been married like 6 or 7 years. It was just a lot of struggles, a lot of situations that happened, things that set those things off that weren't resolved. Sometimes there's things that not getting resolved simply because you don't even really know that there was a problem, but you're just kind of agitated. And you don't. If you were to talk about it, you might. So you need some help. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say, because you might need some help to get to that point. But the idea is to resolve it. What's the problem, and what's the solution? How do we come together? How do we work to make this come back together and be aware? And there's going to be some give and take. But both parties need to realize where they might have overstepped or did this or that, and be willing to basically, apologize and say, and let them know that they're sorry. Confess that. And here's the big one. C, forgive it, right? Matthew 18:21 through 22 states the limit of our forgiveness. Now, there is a limit. I'm just telling you. 70 times 7. Now, I don't know how strong you are in your math, but so I'm going to help you out just a little bit. 70 times 7 is 490 times. Now, technically what that means is just always. When you forgive somebody, it's a possibility in certain relationships that you may not be able to continue forward in the relationship, either in the way it was or at all, because of the nature of the offense, just truly traumatizing. But in most relationships, you're going to irritate each other back and forth, that kind of thing. And Jesus is just saying, forgive. Make it a practice to forgive. We all need forgiveness. I need forgiveness. You need forgiveness. Maybe you're more perfect than I am. I don't know. But so maybe not quite as much. But still, we need forgiveness. And we need to be willing to forgive, right? God was willing to forgive our sins and remember them no more. And so we need to be practicing the same thing, to be like our Father. And listen, forgiveness isn't about releasing the other person as much as it is about releasing you from the bondage that holding on to that offense is creating inside of you. But that's a whole nother lesson, right? The goal of every family should be to recall, resolve, and then truly forgive all kinds of conflicts for whatever reason. See, tensions and problems will always arise. But if we learn how to deal effectively with them and prevent them from eroding the trust and intimacy, then we can establish a stronger family. It begins with understanding how hurt, fear, and frustration are the root of some of these things, right? And so we begin to see things in a different light. It's not just because he's a jerk and she's selfish or whatever else it might be that we're thinking is triggering all this stuff, but rather something's going on there. It's caring about the other person enough I want to understand, because, again, that relationship is important to me, especially in a marriage relationship, with our children, etc. Right? And when we know why the person might be said, we can have that conversation. We know how better to deal with it and how better to resolve it. It is possible to have a family that lives in peace and harmony, right? When we make a commitment to deal with conflict in a godly fashion. It will not always be easy. Again, confrontation is almost like an ugly word, even for Christians, okay? It may even be painful, but we need to be willing to face conflict head on and work through them if we truly desire to see the kind of family that reflects godliness and love, right? Now here, listen to this. We can ask the Holy Spirit to guide us, right? To give us wisdom, to anoint us, to give us the strength sometimes to step into the resolution arena when we don't have that strength ourselves, right? So that we can resolve our conflicts, grow closer together, and be a source of strength for one another the way that the family was designed to be. So I just want to encourage you. Start looking. When you have a conflict, examine it, talk about solutions, and then forgive. That's one of the most important elements of all.